Yeah.
But it's fine.
I want the best of the top first.
You might want to just give them-
Ready? All right. It is 2:13. Call the meeting to order. First item of business, pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Have a quorum present with all board members here. Next item will be public comment on non-agenda items. Anybody wishing to speak on non-agenda items? Seeing no hands. Next item on agenda items. I have one registration form to speak. Ms. Paulina Williams.
Good afternoon, Pauline Williams with Baker Botts, speaking on behalf of landowners in Robertson County, the Lutzes, the Skiles, Casinos, Eli family, Holshers, Bryant's, Moores, and UW Brazos Valley Farm. We know you have both the collateral attack on our existing permits and the pending transport permit hearings as matters that you can discuss in your executive. And we continue to ask that you as you sit and direct your counsel in these matters, that you please stand in the shoes of these landowners as applicants who came to this district, applied for permits, complied with all your rules, jumped through every hoop associated with governmental permitting, made compromises requested by the district, and made investments of their resources and built chains of reliance after securing those final permits and moving forward. This district indicated that it wanted settlements, and that included a referral to mediation in the transport permit hearing. And that's been the message we've heard, and we've honored that. And we've been prepared and ready to sit down at a table with folks all through the fall. We did that repeatedly. And again, this month we were ready. I personally spent hours and hours preparing for and talking with the mediator administrative law judge for that scheduled mediation in the transport hearing, only for the cities and the A&M to refuse to participate in that mediation on February 10th at the 11th hour. So we did not have that opportunity. We remain open to having those discussions and look forward. Your actions have the power to bring litigants and protestants to a table, and you can decide what conduct you want more of and what you want less of. And the district should and could reject A&M's untimely hearing requests on those final permits and even-handedly ratify all of those signed through the general manager's authority under 8.3J and restore that status quo that you intended to do through your ratification rule, consistent with both the common law and your own rule. So put that aside, I will also just note that we do raise our standing objection to the city's representatives participating in the deliberations and actions regarding the permits that are associated with the transport project. The cities are litigants and protestants, and recusal is needed. And then finally, I'll just note that we did file that motion for reconsideration regarding the export fee portion of your recent fee resolution, and that remains pending. So we are available and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anybody else that wishes to speak on agenda items? Seeing none. Item number 1, discussion and possible action on the minutes of the January 9th, 2025 regular board meeting. Al?
First, I will apologize for the technical glitch, and I certainly was not the one that fixed it. It's just so everybody knows, it wasn't me that fixed it. Maybe I caused it, I don't know, but I didn't fix it. Your minutes are in your packet. They've been up online since Monday afternoon. Hope everyone has had the opportunity to peruse and review. If there's no question from anyone, I would ask that you approve the minutes as presented. Certainly we'll take any questions, comments, if need be.
Any questions from the board? If not, entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion, we approve the minutes.
Second. Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 2, financial report from January 2025. Alan?
Okay, let's start off with deposits. Total deposits for the month, $17,447.03. We sent out invoices for the permit annual sector on the 2nd day of January. And we were able to finally get all the water production and sent out permit annual, production annual and the monthly production on January the 30th. So these listings of everything in there, these are going to all be from alluvial wells. We had at this time, we have not received anything from municipalities, industrial, because they had just barely gotten their bills, okay, their invoices. Moving on to the balance sheet, you can see that our total assets are at $1,151,535.27, with CDs at $821,734.56, and total liquid assets at $1,062,471.02. And if you in our total assets center at that 159,832,725, and going to the next page or at the bottom of what you see on the slide, you can see that we balance out on the liabilities and equity side. Next document is your budget expenditures. So again, you can see that 17,000 plus was total income for the month. Our total expenses for the month was 93,398.27. And we've used about 7.5% of the budget. So we're on target there with budgeting. Moving on then to our collateralization report, you can see that our weighted average maturity date is 121.73 days. The percent of portfolio for our CDs and cash is about 76% in CDs, 24% in cash. And down toward the bottom, you'll see that our collateralized levels at Prosperity Bank, we're at 216%. And at South Star Bank, we're at 167%. Last two documents here is a listing of the bill paid expenses by vendor with 54,123.65. Anybody have any? You certainly look down through there. There was nothing other than this will be the first that you've seen with Sabrina Brown, our legislative consultant, that $5,000. You can see a very small payment to the State Office of Administrative Hearings. Everything else is the other one is mainly masonry. We did the wall here that's behind right here has been repaired and has been sealed, and we'll probably need to seal it probably annually. That the brick is 100 years old and it absorbed a lot of sealant, but that's a pretty cheap thing to keep that thing preserved. So that project is done and behind us. And then the last page, you'll see that we had no checks, anything going out of the well assistance fund, and got $12.16 in deposit. Balance currently in that account was $47,721.71. Anybody have any questions?
Any questions from the board? If not,
I'd ask that you accept or approve the financial report as presented.
Move approval is presented.
Second.
have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 3, presentation by Mark Nichols, updating the board on progress relating to the Brazos River Alluvium Aquifer Groundwater Surface Water Interaction Study sponsored by the Brazos Valley GCD and being conducted by Baylor University.
So y'all seen Mark before. He has been working diligently throughout 2024, started in late 2023, as a matter of fact, on this, nearing the tie bow around everything. And for the audience, if you since you don't have it here and you might need to see it up here, you're certainly okay to turn your chairs around or move or stand up or whatever it might be. So I apologize for this not working over here. Go ahead, Mark.
Thank you, board. I'll be starting. I want to start by just acknowledging that we took this research and presented it at the national meeting of the Geological Society of America in Anaheim, California, and talked to our peers and received good feedback on the science that we were doing. And so that was really exciting for us. I want to follow up a little bit briefly on, we had the meeting on December 9th for the public. I mean, there was a lot of interest on why are we doing this work? Why are we interested in this? And so I wanted to reiterate that. Obviously, you all know the river and the alluvium are very important resources for agriculture, for your livelihoods here. And so understanding how the system works is the only way that you're going to be able to manage it or protect it. And currently, the groundwater modeling and the research has been limited based on the amount of data that's available and the amount of time that's been put into it. Isn't sufficient to understand how much it changes throughout the system. Whether that be within our counties or the difference between how it is up in Waco versus here, and so forth. So that's why we're doing this. We're interested in understanding the aquifer in the system so that we can manage it better. So getting into a little bit of the data, I'll start with a couple of slides on the chemistry and then some more that y'all have seen some before of the head data later. So really, there's a bunch of plots up here that are showing pretty similar water chemistries between the river and the alluvium. The river is in the darker blue and the alluvium is in the lighter blue. And the couple points that I want to point out here are that the bicarbonate, which is on the right side, this doesn't show very well. On the right side of the middle plot, bicarbonate is generally higher in the alluvium than it is in the aquifer. So doing more routine sampling might help to kind of tease out these trends that we're seeing, and having more routine sampling will help with that. And the other thing that is important to keep in mind is with all chemistry data and really with all data in terms of the aquifer, we have a sample bias in that we're only sampling in wells. A good driller isn't going to drill where there's not good water or where there's not water that can be taken out. And so you do have to keep that in mind as you're going throughout these studies, that there is a sample bias that you have to be aware of. So one of our recommendations for the district, if it's possible moving forward, is to do some routine chemical sampling so that when things happen, you have a baseline of change. And that will be discussed further in the report. We also have a couple of points. They're kind of at this point anecdotal. They're not enough points to be defensive on the isotopic composition. So looking at this chart, there's a lot of numbers and words. Really what you got to figure out, or what you got to take from it, is the heavier isotopes. So this is oxygen on the x-axis and hydrogen on the y-axis. The heavier ones are over on the right and up. So those Brazos River ones are a lot heavier. And what that means is that they have been exposed to evaporation. So essentially the lighter isotopes evaporate off, leaving behind an enriched, heavier water source. And so this shows a difference between the river and the alluvium, which we would expect. And then there's some that will plot in the middle. And you have to kind of think about what that means. And there's a couple of different explanations. One is that the water could be mixing. And the other is that there could be some evaporation. So this well in specific is a 16-inch diameter hole with just a concrete lid on top of it. So it's not very well isolated. We weren't able to pump out all the water that was in the casing. And so that's, kind of what I was saying with anecdotal. But this is a good avenue to go further if you're wanting to do more research on, and people will be doing more research, eventually on this system. And this is one avenue to take that, is to do really good isotopic sampling between wells that are interior into the aquifer versus the river, and those that we think might be interacting. And so it would look something very similar to this if there was interaction. But again, there's not enough data to really say that for certain. Moving away from the chemistry side and into the physical side, I've shown this plot before for those that have seen it, but I'll talk about it again. Looking at on the x-axis time and on the y-axis elevation or potential energy or hydraulic head, whichever term you want to use. But water travels from high potential energy to low potential energy. So from this, the groundwater gradient would suggest flow from the red well through the green well and into the river. And this is what we would expect, it being a perennial stream, something that flows all the time in an arid environment like Texas. However, during wetter periods of time, like this one on the bottom, that river level comes up in long enough terms that it can kind of reverse that gradient temporarily. And then there are two locations indicated by the arrows in which the wells seem to flip. But given this data, there's not enough temporal resolutions. There's not enough points to really say much about it. Because especially in 2015, you take a sample in July and then you don't take another sample until January. Things change a lot through that. And so we looked at this trend and we wanted to describe it in a lot more detail. And so that's what I'll do next. So this is down in Bryan, College Station, Texas, right by Highway 21 where it crosses the Brazos River. And there's three wells, or two wells and the river. So the river is in blue, and then the well furthest into the aquifer is in red, and the closest one to the river is in green. And I'll zoom this in a little bit, just taking that left section first. What we're seeing is a response in the pressure grade or the head in the green well closest to the river, responding to fluctuations in river level. And so as the river comes up, we kind of see the pressure in the well come up a little bit. And it mimics that pattern with a little bit of a lag and with a muted magnitude. So it's a lot less of a fluctuation. And then even just as far as this image is, which is less than 1,000 feet in the aquifer, we're seeing no pressure connection in this location. And so what that means in reality is that there is a pressure response and there will be some water moving due to that pressure response. But certainly it's not going to be any further than 1,000 feet because there's not even a pressure response that far. And likely it's much less. So you can think of it kind of, if there was a bunch of water coming out and flowing into the aquifer, and then you put a dam there, it's going to start building up, right? The water's acting as a dam and it's starting to build up that water that was going out. And so we'll describe that again a little bit in more detail in the report as well, but that's what we're seeing happening. And then there's two pumping events later in that graph that are pictured.
Well, Mark, you were saying that so you're saying the water in the river coming up is causing the damming.
Yes, it's causing the damming effect in the aquifer. And there will be some water that goes from the river, that's what the gradient would suggest. It's not going to go very far, very fast. And these temporary reversals last a couple of months. And they're paired afterwards with a long period of time that looks more like this. A very flat gradient that is very consistent. So that red well hasn't moved much, that green well hasn't moved much, and the river hasn't moved much. And so, you have lots of years that looks like this, and then you have a couple of months that look high. And so that's kind of what the system is. The other thing that Dr. Joe and I have been discussing a little bit is you're not going to be pumping heavily in the period of time when it's really wet. You're going to be pumping when it's really dry. And when it's dry, the system looks a lot like this, with water coming out of the aquifer and into the river. And so that's just something to consider as well, that this would be the condition that would be more likely that heavy pumping would occur under. Moving away from Bryan north into outside of Hearn, where FM 485 crosses the Brazos River. We have two wells set up in a little bit of a similar fashion, although they're a little bit closer to the same distance to the river. But the green well is still closer to the river than the red well. We see similar trends. This was installed a little bit later, and so these fluctuations in the river are a little bit smaller. And I'll zoom in again to the A section here. And I've indicated with the dotted lines one of those events where it looks like it's mirrored in the wells. And here it seems to be a little bit better connected. A smaller fluctuation is being responded to a little bit further into the aquifer and at both locations. And there's a little bit more nuance to all of that. But really what we're seeing here is just a piece of evidence that the same conditions are seen. You mean to? Do that. There we go. The same conditions are found up in this location as they were in Bryan. And we have a third location that we'll discuss in the report. But those trends are at least carrying in a couple of different locations that we've sampled. And future work may well look at these trends in more places. Speaking of future plans, we're doing our last field work day on Monday, looking at mini piezometers. So taking bank flow measurements, and essentially there's a picture of me doing a dry run of that, or a wet run of that here. And essentially we're going to install a very small well in the sediments of the river, allow it to kind of settle. And if that water level, the hydraulic head in the well is higher than it is in the river, that suggests flow from the sediments, the bank, the aquifer into the river. And so we're going to be doing that just as another piece of evidence for what we're seeing. And then I will be finishing up working with the data up in Calvert, coordinating with Aqua Strategies, and finish drafting the report and my thesis, which I will defend at Baylor in March, and will be open access to anybody that cares to read through it. And we'll finish up the final report for y'all as well. I'd like to thank Alan, the board, Wayne and Dr. Joe from Baylor, Aqua Strategies, the landowners, and y'all for being here. And with that, I'll take any questions that you might have.
Any questions on the board?
Appreciate your hard work.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you for the
Very
Thank you.
diligent.
That's cool.
Thank you, Mark.
Item number 4, discussion and possible action on the approval and adoption of the 2024 district annual report.
As you can see that it's required for the general manager to put the annual report by the end of February. And so we annually do it at the first meeting in February, or at the meeting in February. So each one of y'all have a copy. And if you see something we're going through, it can be changed. I would say still semi-draft, because if you have to find something, please let me know. But I've been through it several times to try and get it right. Okay, so I'm gonna hit some of the high points that are in there, and then those are copies for y'all to take home. And I know you don't have anything to read, and I know that you just got all the time in the world. I know. So trying to fill those gaps. Okay. So starting off with the permitted wells in 2024, non-exempt wells, there were 8. 4 of them were agricultural, 3 industrial, 1 multi-use agricultural industrial. You can see the acre feet, total acre feet on the 8 was 2,760, which was greatly reduced from the previous year. And that was in the 160 something thousand. So greatly reduced in 2024. Permitted wells by aquifer. Those agricultural wells were in the alluvium. We got 2,060 in the alluvium, 310 in the Calvert Bluff, 350 in the Sparta, and 40 in the Yawad Jackson. None in the Hooper, none in the Simsboro, Carrizo, or Queen City. Moving on to the next slide, metered production by aquifer. You can see that. I will not go through these. I can say that the Simsboro stayed fairly steady. It was a little lower than it had been in 2023, but not significantly lower. None of these were significantly lower, and several were pretty much the same. So year over year, yes, we pumped a little less water in 2024 from the 8 aquifers with permitted wells, but not a large number. Next slide is metered production by category. You can see the agricultural, municipal there. This is the same trend we see year in and year out. Steam electric was over 1,000 acre feet lower for whatever reason. But that one was about the only one I can say had what I would call a significant drop or reduction. And generated fees by category. Again, you can see municipal, rural water supply, and industrial are the lion's share. We had estimated in our budgeting, we had estimated about 750,000, 51, somewhere in that neighborhood. We're gonna end up with 834, 710, 59. So, that was it was a bit unexpected, but I will say this, there was more pumping done in September, October than in previous years. We got that dry period and it kicked up. So we were going on year over year. Normally September, October, you're already dropping off and you're not seeing a ramp up in pumping. So that accounted for some of that. In exempt wells, we had a total of 269 that were registered, 81 in Brazos, 163 in Robertson, and 25 oil and gas rig supply wells. All wells by category, you now have a total of that we have registered and or permitted 4,945, and then exempt wells, meaning the domestic livestock, oil and gas, and any type of, we now have a new category of rig supply wells being for water, to drill water wells. Okay, that's come on. That's a new one that was put into last session. And we do have one of those, and we'll have many, many more of those to come. Anyway, 1,338 historic use wells or permitted wells, 611, drilling operating permits at 482. And you see there the total 7376. And I'll say again, there's another 3,000 or 4,000 wells out there that we don't know about. And we just don't know about. I can assure you. Picked up 11 the other day. Just, oh, I've got 11 wells here. That was on one property, 11 wells. So anyway, we're getting there slowly but surely. Next slide is our compliance with the DFC. We are in compliance. You can see the middle column is our adopted DFC for each of the aquifers. The right-hand column is how much artesian decline you've had since 2024. The Hooper was down just slightly. It's moved down just a little bit. I think it was 6 last year. I think it's, and now it's 11. Simsburg was at 58 this time, when it's not this time last year. In June, when we were doing a report, it was down from 58. It's gone to 66. No change in the Calvert Bluff. I think that's a 2-foot change in the Carrizo, none in the Queen City, 1 or 2 feet in the Sparta. And you see that the Yawa continues to be a gaining offer. So coming closer to land surface. And our alluvial percent of saturation on both sides of 21 remained at 64%. Monitoring wells, 223 in a total of monitoring wells, dedicated monitoring wells. In 2024, there's the breakdown by aquifer. You can see that we're really paying attention to the Simsboro, of course, with 81 wells that were measured. We had a total of 542 measurements during 2024. I want to remind you all of what the fee structure was in 2024. Our rate for public water supply for industrial commercial was 4.875 cents per thousand. Agricultural was at 19.75 cents per acre foot. Steam electric was at 31 cents per acre foot produced, and the export fee was at 20 cents per 1,000 gallons transported in 2024. Quickly on education, 6,161 students were taught in the classroom last year, fourth, fifth, seventh graders. Robertson County Water Field Day was on the 24th. We always have about 230, 35 kids. Went off just without a hitch and went really well. Brazos County Water Field Day was on the 8th of October, 300 there. We've been alternating between the College Station fifth grades, and some of them have more than others. The year before, there was 375 kids. So this happened to be the year that there was a smaller fifth grade class. Anyway, 300 there. The Tri-County meeting was February 13th of last year at 60. And as Mark brought something to your attention, we did have the workshop and stakeholder meeting, the Bringing the Brazos Together, on the 9th of October over in Burleson County, but right next to the river there on JRG. Had 94 and lots of questions and lots of interest. And we had a good bit of when are we going to do this again, being a follow-up to the things that we talked about. So it was well received. And the last one on this is the management plan. At this time last year, we didn't know exactly where things were. We had not heard from the Water Development Board. We turned everything in. Come to find out, it had already been finally adopted on December the 20th of 2023, and they had just failed to let us know. So we're done with that and got 3.5 more years before we have to do that again. Have we got any questions? That was a real quick look at the high points, but the plan will give you more background of leading up to some of the things. And I will be, for the public, I will be putting it up online as soon as it's approved for the public to an approved format. So, any questions?
Any questions from the
Comment?
board?
Since you approved the 2024 district annual report.
Entertain a motion?
Move that we approve the annual report as presented.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 5, presentation, discussion, and possible action related to matters involving the planning and setting of desired future conditions for each of the managed aquifers.
Go ahead, James.
Okay.
I will.
Yeah, you give us an intro here.
Yeah, okay, so in your packets, you should have a couple of pages, and maybe I didn't get them in there. I might not have. If I didn't, there's James and Chris made a list of the things we talked about at the DFC workshop, okay? And things that you ask as a board and the public ask questions and wanted to see certain things. And so James and Chris and Ty and John Seifert have been working diligently since 23rd of January to try and, we're not going to have all the answers today from what I'm hearing, but what we will is going to give you a lot more information for us to drive forward on the DFC. So let me go in and get those while you get started. I'm going to go get those sponsors, okay?
Okay, I've got an outline here that kind of summarizes some of those. But essentially, as Alan mentioned, there were some topics that came up. One of those was a question about Simsboro transmissivity. How is the model doing compared to what we know from pumping test? The next one was GAM predictions to date versus what we're seeing with S19, and how's the model doing with the projections to date. S19 predictive Simsboro aquifer pumping comparison. So we're going to look at that for each county, and comparison of a 2000 start date for the DFC versus a 2010 start date. And then looking at available drawdown throughout the district based on the 4 runs that we've done already. One of the things that we summarized at the DFC workshop was the 4 main runs that we've made so far, starting with S19 from the last round. And then we've made 4 different runs generally that kind of summarize, thoughts y'all had on different projections. And so we'll go through each one of those. There was a question about the lift and the power required for, all of these wells when water levels are dropping. And so we're not done with that analysis yet, but we have just some very preliminary assessment there. And pumping impacts on public water supply wells. Spoiler alert, we're not done with that one at all. We need to go through and understand better what we have with screen intervals and potentially pump settings on some of those, and look at how the runs that we've done so far will impact those. So we've got that in there as a to-do, and it's on the to-do list, but we're not really there to show much today. Average drawdown in Robertson and Brazos counties. That was the topic of, hey, can we have multiple zones that we look at for a DFC? Our starting place with that was the county line. Let's look at the DFC or the drawdowns that are calculated. They're not DFCs yet. They're just average drawdowns calculated in Robertson County and Brazos County for the 4 runs that we have, been talking about. So that's the synopsis and the outline for what we're going through. Let's start with comparison of GAM data, of GAM transmissivity data in the Simsboro versus what we have out there from pumping tests. So at the top table, you see data from older wells, the city of Franklin, O'Brien well, College Station well, Sanderson Farm wells, and those numbers on the left correlate to the numbers on the map, so you can see where these are located. And so what we see from the latest GAM we're using today, after the last calibration with the Vista Ridge data coming in, you can see the comparison there between the pumping test transmissivity on the left and GAM transmissivity on the right. If we start at the top with the Franklin well, you've got 62,000 versus 52,000. Go down to the Bryan well, very close on that one. Bryan College Station well, very close there again. And the Sanderson Farm wells, a little bit further there. Not quite a factor of 2. Now, the thing to remember about most of these is that when the GAM was last calibrated, the best data is coming from, Bryan and College Station as far as pumping goes. The data is available for the wells as far as transmissivity. So when you calibrate the model, you can kind of lock those things down to a degree and not have the model, iterate to what it thinks is the best answer based on observed water levels. You can kind of do a better job at calibrating where you have a lot of pumping data and good pump test data. And so that's what we see in the Bryan and College Station areas, and probably the Franklin well too. I'm not sure if they had the pumping test data there, but they probably did. New data since the GAM was last calibrated, and forgive me, I don't know if this is Goodland Farms or Upwell. It's the new wells that were drilled out for UW, and the pumping test data is shown there again at 50 in the first well, 50,000 versus 38 in the GAM, 50,000 versus 39,000 in the GAM, and then 86 versus 55. So there we're seeing essentially a little bit higher transmissivities estimated from the pumping test than we are currently with the most recent calibrated GAM. Any questions on that? Moving on to the next topic, how's the GAM doing with water levels projecting, you know, the most recent water levels that we've measured versus what we're simulating with S19. And so the top of the graph, this is the Facino house well, one of the longest monitored wells, at least that we have in that area. And there is some a blank spot in the data there. Alan, you might want to comment on that. I think there's some question about data availability and validity there, but we do have data going all the way back to almost 2000. And then you can see that the more recent data, you can see the trend of the S19 simulation there, and the trend, the actual red line and data points are the measured water levels. The pattern is the same. The trend is mostly the same. The well is actually, you know, coming in about, you know, generally 30 to 40 foot lower than the simulation in that area. Also on the graph, you can see the dashed blue line, and that's the top of the Simsboro. The other dashed blue line at the bottom is the bottom of the Simsboro. And so you can kind of see where the water level is in respect to the top of the aquifer. So that's our first well to look at. The second one is the City of Franklin well. Again, you've got the two dash lines, the top and bottom of the Simsboro. The green line is the simulated Simsboro water level, and then the measured water levels from 2015 through looks like 2023 or 4 there. Again, the pattern as far as the trend is good, and the water levels are being simulated. Looks like about 40 to 50 feet too high by the GAM in that area. The City of Hearn at well 4, again, same graph, same color, same comparison to do here, and generally not a bad fit overall. And this is, again, one of those wells where we've got, you know, pretty good long record from water levels there in that area. City of Bryan well. All the same information. You can certainly see the aquifers getting deeper. We're, you know, top of the Simsboro there, almost 2,000 feet going to 2,700. And the water levels tracking pretty well in the big scheme of things. Remember the S19, we're about to look at this. The S19 data, the pumping data from 2018 forward is a projection. And so that's kind of the predictive portion of the model. So if there's some divergence in some of these, it may be related to that. Not so much in Brazos County. It's probably more in Robertson County on those numbers. So City of College Station well 6, you can see the patterns and trends there. Generally pretty good. Texas A&M well 8. Generally pretty good. Okay. Now, how do the pumping numbers in the GAM S19, how do they compare with our reported Simsboro pumping? And here again, we see a time sequence graph where we're starting at 2009, going all the way to 2023. And you can see the GAM calibration period there that's labeled at the top, starting, that's from 2010 up to 2018. That's all part of the calibration period. From that point forward is predictive, part of the predictive model. And so for Robertson County, you can see that the ramp up, the yellow bars during the predictive period are actually higher than the recent actual pumping data. And again, that's because of the last round of planning. That's what the projection was that the permits would start to ramp up at that time and go forward. So actual pumping has been quite a bit lower than what's actually predicted. We're in S19, and then for Brazos County, again, calibration period versus predictive period. Overall, pretty similar here. Most of the municipal pumping, a lot easier to project than some of the other pumping in Robertson County. Any questions on that? Overall, other than the GAMS predictive pumping period in Robertson County, the water levels look pretty good overall. And even if you look at these water levels that are projected a little bit higher in Robertson County, they've been high. They've been projected to be high the whole time, going back all the way to 2000. I think it's just part of what the model's doing in that area. I don't think it's specifically related to the difference between the predictive pumping, since 2018 being different. The trend that we see is that almost all those wells are a little higher early on.
Could that Brazino well, the house well up there, being on the downside of that fault that we found, could that account for the red and meaning the green line? I don't think that fault's being accounted for. Not there.
It may not be an account.
If it's not, I'm saying, would that have some effect?
It certainly could. Certainly. So the next question was, hey, if we started our DFC.
We get off that, can I back up on?
Yeah.
Just to clarify on that predicted period, you're predicting a ramp up, right?
On this one?
Yeah, that one.
This one.
Yeah.
So in S19, Alan, maybe you can describe how you and Mr. Seifert came up with the predictive ramp up there.
Part of that, I know part of it has to do with the amount that we put in for anything out here at Walnut Creek, at the power plant out here and at the mine. So there was some extra predictive water put in out there. But most of this, I think I'm right, would be what we've put in with, when we've been putting in all of our permits. And so we said, whatever had been turned in on the permits and said, this is how much the pumping was. I believe that it was higher than what it was actually was.
That's my understanding too, based on discussions with.
And we've
with
had
John
long
Seifert
discussions about it.
and kind of watching that play out.
And the
last round.
Brazino well shows us that. So.
That answer the question? So if we start our DFC or average drawdown calculation in 2010, like the rest of the districts in GMA 12 are doing, instead of 2000, which was y'all's decision at some point to do that and keep doing that up through the last round of planning. The question was, well, what happens to the numbers if we start calculating drawdown at 2010, like all the rest of the districts? So we're just showing you how that trend and pattern develops for each one of the aquifers. We got Sparta on the upper left, and then Queen City, Carrizo lower left, and Calvert Bluff. You can see the change in the numbers. And when we get to the Simsboro, the comparison there, starting, red line starting in 2010, like the rest of the districts are doing, that number's, the 262 is the DFC number. It's not it's not quite the same as the 250 calculated by the model, but remember that's because they took into account the 10% uncertainty there. That's why the DFC is lower than the 250 that we're calculating there. But essentially, 55 feet difference for the Simsboro. There was a question about simulation.
You'd explain that slide just a little bit better, because I'm
Okay.
meaning the 195 relates to the 262 in what way? We're starting in 2010.
It's just a matter.
The other one's starting in 2000. So what does that mean? How do they relate?
Yeah, you're starting, the drawdown clock in 2010, like you just said. And so you're missing that first 10 years of drawdown and plus any other aquifer dynamics that might be changing differently if you start at 2010.
Okay.
So the number gets lower. The drawdown is less because you're changing the range of time over which you look at it. So, and that's depicted on the graphs in each case. So the water levels in the aquifer simulated by the model aren't changing at all. Every water level in every well is exactly the same. You're just calculating the drawdown from a different starting point. And this is what is talked about in GMA and DFC planning all the time. It's like, well, where's the starting line? Where's the finish line? Are we changing the starting line? Are we changing the finish line? What's fair? What's not? How do we go about this? It's an ongoing debate. Does that answer your question, Alan?
Best that my brain can handle. We'll have longer discussions, deeper discussions.
So just by changing where you calculate the starting point, it's making 55-footer difference for the Sims.
So does this put you at a different percentage of the DFC that you've used? Does it change your DFC? Does your DFC still stay at 262?
If you were stating your DFC as a drawdown and calculating it at 20 and starting at 2010, it would end up at 195, and then you do your 10% on top of that if that's how you wanted to do it. So the number would change. Your DFC would change for S19 if you approached it the same way the rest of the districts in GMA 12 are approaching it, starting line being 2010. Does that make sense to the board? Anybody have any other questions?
But related to mean sea level, is it the same point?
Yes. The water levels in the wells are being simulated the exact same way. It's just a matter of where the starting line is for your drawdown calculation. Drawdown 0 in 2000 with the blue line, drawdown is 0 in 2010 for the red line. And then it's just a relative change from there. The model, we didn't do any new model runs here. We just changed the way we calculated the drawdown and the DFC. And that's why this is an ongoing debate about where the starting line is and where the finish line is, all of that. And the water levels in the wells as simulated in the model, they're all the same. So it's an important point. Thanks for the question, Jason. It's an important point to note. There's no new model run here. Just the way that the drawdown is calculated. Water levels in the wells. If your model was perfect, the water levels in the wells would be the same either way.
So the difference in 10 years from the 262 to 195, so that's 67 feet, right? We've seen 66 feet calculated by our DFC wells in 24 years. Actual, that's actual. This is modeled.
Correct.
Okay, so how are we gonna make those do that? We know where we are now on our compliance with the DFC in Simsboro. We've lost 66 feet on the average. Okay, this is still on the average, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we lost 67 feet here in 10 years. Just at that 10-year period. That doesn't jive for me. I mean, I don't know how you make those match up. Maybe you don't.
But you're 66 feet, your red line is right at 2025, 66 feet. I mean, that's right.
In 10 years, not in,
Correct.
not in 24 years,
Correct.
25 years now.
Well, and one of those differences is back to going back to the Robertson County pumping.
Oh, yeah.
For better or worse, we're projecting a different pumping through 2023 at least than we have seen in that area.
Okay.
So I think to your point, there's probably different ways of looking at it, and maybe I won't articulate it very well, but it speaks to sort of the relative nature of a drawdown DFC to a degree. And it does matter when you start. It does matter when you end. It does matter. It's a relative calculation. It's not necessarily tied to, the aquifer condition, so to speak, which is why the other question that's next in line is, what about available drawdown in the aquifer? And so what we've done here, and Alan, I don't think I answered your question, but maybe if we move forward to the next question, we'll have a conversation about it all. Simulated available drawdown at 2070, the approximate land surface is shown there at the top, and then you've got the S19 run is the first blue dash line, and then from there we went to, let's see. So from there we went to what we call version 1. That was some minor modifications in the pumping file. Version 2 had more in the pumping file, and that's where we updated the pumping based on municipal projections from the 2022 state water plan. And then the third one, the green one there, is what Alan brought, what y'all approved for Alan to bring to GMA 12. It was his best estimate based on, the negotiations that were going on at the time with all the permit holders and discussions with permit holders and Alan. And you all thought, hey, that we can show that as our best estimate with today's information. And that's what was shown at GMA 12. And then actually before that, y'all had done a run with all the permits in there. And that's that lowest line that shows the water levels, right above the top of the Simsboro there on the northern part of Robertson County. And then it's obviously, has the most pumping. It is the lowest water levels. Everything's still above the top of the Simsboro here. You obviously have a lot less available drawdown with each one of those successive water level declines. And of course, to speak, every well is going to be different in along the cross section, and as Simsboro is getting deeper, as far as all of those other issues that determine, availability, socioeconomic impacts, and all of that. So this was just one way to depict available drawdown in one particular cross section based on the runs that y'all have done today.
Do you have an approximation of where Highway 21 is here? Or OSR, either one of them? I wonder if Chris would know.
Yeah, Chris probably would. Which one is that, Alan?
20 OSR,
Yeah,
that's where the well field is.
you might be able to see it.
OSR.
You might be able to see it there on the map. There's roads on that map.
Yeah. So here's OSR coming right through here. So how would that, I'm trying to see.
Yeah, I apologize. We didn't have time to put very good markings on our cross section.
Okay, but if it's A to A, if that's relative, then it's probably, I think.
Right in
I think it's gonna be right in here someplace. Because that's where your 1,000 TDS and better is. I mean, you get less, get lower, you're gonna get into some of the brackish water. It's encroaching, right, Stephen?
You can tell by water depth where it is on there.
Do I say it again?
You can tell where it crosses Simsboro by water depth where you drill your wells. Aren't the wells at OSR about 1,800? Right?
Might be deeper here.
Okay. Yeah, that's right, about
2,800.
yeah. I mean, that tell you where it intercepts where you're at on the highway, but anyway, doesn't matter.
So off of this one, what's the calculation of available drawdown? I mean, this is a great map here for me to visualize and go, okay, well, here's where these models fell in. So do you take down to the freshwater line everything above, there's the total available area.
That's how we'd make the calculation. I think we're still double checking the numbers on that. That's why I don't have it here today.
So would it be, because this is one of the questions that they asked at the workshop, is would you say this area here, I mean, with it dropping off, would one area have a different available remaining drawdown percentage in one area and the deeper than it would in the up at closer to the outcrop?
Yeah,
Is that
certainly.
what you would do, or?
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about an available drawdown from the top of the aquifer,
Yeah.
as here, then yes, you're gonna have larger numbers as you head south, right? For each one of these runs. And, you know, if we broke it up by county, then, you know, it'd be different. Of course, in every well, it's also gonna be different. And then you've got all the practical issues where we're just about to start to visit here shortly. So what we will do, this is part of the undone business at this point, is to calculate average available drawdown numbers for each one of these runs. Similar to your 262 DFC, what would your percentage available drawdown be? I think that's what you're getting
So
at.
those smaller numbers, there would be smaller numbers further towards the outcrop,
Correct.
larger numbers down here, those averaged, just like we're averaging the actual drawdown from, and we
Yeah.
have the same effect.
Yeah.
And okay, that makes sense.
And to that effect, there's a couple, I think there's 3 or 4 nodes or, you know, grid blocks up near the outcrop here where the model is cutting back pumping due to the water level being close to the top of the aquifer. That's just the auto flow reduction in the model. And so it's the way the model is set up, approved by TWDB. It's got a certain cutback function in there. And you can see where that dash line for BVGCD all in that particular run, when you go up very close to the outcrop on the northern end, there's some of those cells there that get cut back. The pumping gets cut back. The aquifer still, water level still above the top of the aquifer, but the way the calculation is done, it's starting to.
I would suggest, because I think these guys are aware of it, I think we've talked about it, but there's 2 faults north of Calvert.
Yeah.
And one of them is just on the north side of 979, running off to the northeast. And then you go up to South Tidwell Prairie Road, and you got another one pretty much paralleling it right up through the mine area. And that one's well documented. Bob Harden and his whole gang, well documented. The other one's not so much, only because of our measurements, and we've found that needs to be identified in some form or fashion in the modeling
So
somehow.
we modified the model for the public hearing on the transport.
Yep.
That model contains that, and I think that's still the model we're using here.
Okay.
So there may be some other, you know, changes or improvements we can make to that, but we tried to incorporate some of
It
that.
would make a difference because the effect of pumping, getting through those 2 faults is difficult. So when you get up in that outcrop area, you're probably not seeing the real effect that, I mean, the real effect is probably not what is being modeled.
That should be. And we need to go back and check to see where those, if those cells are on the south side of those faults or if they're confirm that. I can't recall at this time. There was a lot of questions about sort of the economic impact of pumping. Obviously, y'all know that that's a really complicated question depending on where you're at in the aquifer, where you're pumping from. The only thing we've done thus far is to just provide a very basic chart here of pumping lift versus horsepower required at various production capacities. Your top black line there is the 3,000 GPM. The sort of orangish line is the 2,000, and then the blue line is the 1,000. And along the x-axis there, you've just got lift going from 0 to 1,000, and on the right, on the y-axis there, you've got just the horsepower required to lift that capacity of water. And we didn't feel very comfortable going beyond 1,000 foot of lift or 1,000 horsepower because those there may be a lot of there may be some applications out there that are doing that, and certainly some are getting or pushing the limits there. And so John Seifert, Tyler Davidson, our engineers are calling around to all the pump manufacturers and trying to figure out what the practical limits are of things that are of pumps and motors and how big a casing you'd need to go deeper and maximize all your horsepower down hole. You know, Bryan College Station, Texas A&M, y'all may already be looking at that probably with the things y'all are facing. So this was just the first starting point of looking at, you know, the requirements for pumping large amounts of water from, you know, different depths and working to gather information on the types of other folks' experience with pumping water from, you know, large volumes of water from very deep. We know, as we talked about in the DFC workshop, we know that, you know, the oil field and high voltage pumps, they're pumping smaller volumes from very deep. It's when you get into larger volumes, it's where the questions are still out there. So
this is more trying to answer what Jason brought up of where's that economic level of pumping without having to go just drill more wells in order to get the amount of water you need.
correct.
I think this is the starting point for that, Jason. I just said, you know, find that in that he's already stated, and I think this is a good starting point for that. So we need to build off of that, then make any suggestions and how we fill that in. I think that's a really important, to me, that's a really important point to be made of just what's physically capable, what can you physically do, and how deep and still have water over the top of the pump. You need to know where that limit is. For now, I mean, it's going to change over time, Mark. They're gonna have better, they're gonna develop different pumps. They're gonna do lots of things. Yeah, but for what do we have available now? So.
And that's part of you know, partly a technology question, you know, to understand the limits of where you're at today. And it flows into, you know, really difficult policy decisions that you guys have to make here and, you know, across GMA 12. This is the one where we're still in progress. The impact on public water supply wells weren't quite ready on that one yet. Okay, the final, this was the issue where, hey, if we draw a line somewhere and we have different DFC zones, what would it look like? Well, we started with the county line. These are average drawdowns calculated for Robertson County only in the Simsboro. And so again, these are the 4 runs. They're identified on the bottom there in the legend. The black run is S19. Instead of the 262, you get 194 in Robertson County. Then if you step through the other runs, let's just go to the green one, for instance. That was y'all's best estimate that you presented at GMA 12. In Robertson County, that's 291 feet. And then with all permits in, that's the red line there, 423. That's for Robertson County. Go to Brazos County, same set of runs. Average drawdown calculations for Brazos County. So there's obviously differences in the numbers. I think the question was oriented, hey, does it make sense to have different DFC zones? And you can calculate it. And we all know that the aquifer is, you know, conductive across that county line and, you know, doesn't care about the county line. This is just the first way of looking at how you might visualize that and potentially anticipate what DFCs might be based on runs you've already done and calculated the drawdowns for those. And again, we didn't make any new runs here. We're just calculating the drawdowns differently. And there's my classic clarification disclaimer that I'm not a lawyer and y'all make all the hard decisions.
That's the disclaimer. So I guess my question is, and James gave me a whole lot of information here, but, and I will make that, I'm gonna send this to everybody after the meeting's over with. And I will put this up online for everybody in the public to be able to see it. So it'll be up for everybody to try and digest it. Where do you want us to, I mean, some of it's still in development and some of it we even haven't gotten to, but we need to know, how do you want to continue moving this forward with what we're doing? It's a good start.
Yeah.
They made a very good start. But the 8 points that you brought up, there's a few questions that are gonna have to be answered when we get over to GMA 12, and that's gonna be, what's our pumping files gonna look like? And are we going to, how are we gonna express our DFCs? And where are we gonna start? Meaning, are we gonna just start with S19 as it is now? We're gonna call it scenario 1 and everybody starts from there and we go and we do our filing, our pump files, or do we go in and clean everything up, bring it up to what's really happening in S19, which is my suggestion, is that anything that was put into S19, if it still exists, then it should be, what is it doing today? Not what it was doing 5 years ago. What is it doing today? And how does that look on, if there was ramped up, if it was ramped up properly, great. If it wasn't, that needs to be trued, I believe. We need to make some of these decisions. So we got GMA 12 meeting on the 21st. I think we'll get more guidance on how everybody is ready to proceed and that kind of thing. Maybe we'll get some better guidance, but any feedback from what you've seen, what I've said here, any feedback?
Any feedback from the board?
I have a question on the 4 runs that, you use for all this information. Are those runs out on the webpage?
The presentations, I think, we've made those presentations at board meetings over the last year and a half. The results are, the model files aren't yet. We can put them out there if that's something that's helpful.
I'm just in there. I've been listening to all this for a little while, and I can't remember exactly what the assumptions are on the last one, or the best estimate. And
The red one?
yes, the red one.
That's
is great.
all the permits.
The best estimate was S19 plus growth put in for the Bryan College Station area and 50,000 acre feet of pumping from export and the files, an adjustment on the files that were pumping files that were associated out here where the project's going to be, that's been there before, and those have been brought back to 5,000 acre feet maximum. So that's in there. That's basically what it, don't you think?
What I'm just saying is whoever's looking, if you put this out there and whoever's looking at, they're gonna have to dig to figure out what the assumptions were for each one of those. I would put your best
You're
estimate.
saying state what's in there?
Yeah, maybe just put the assumptions.
Okay.
somewhere in.
Okay,
Oh, okay.
we can do that, yeah.
And if you can include timing of, when that stuff's coming on or how,
Right.
what your
Right.
assumption was on, like, that would be.
Okay. We can, I don't know what we can do, Monique, to make that available after this meeting. I can send it to Alan. It's basically just pulling PowerPoint slides together.
Yeah.
And as a refresher on which ones are these. You're not alone. I forget the details too. So, yeah, it'd be a good thing to do.
I think first thing needs to happen is all the districts in GMA need to agree on what pumping we're going to include per district. I mean, it's going to be all the permits, it's going to be all the active pumping versus some projected pumping.
I did query one, which is all I could query without it becoming a walking quorum. And, it seems as though there's going, at least with this one, it was, we'd like to see with everything. So fine, you've seen what it looks like with us, but we don't have a problem with that. That was my question, my answer at the time for that bookend. Now, from there, I don't know anything, but we should have a deep discussion on that on the 21st.
And just to recall the schedule, we are, mid-February here. Proposed DFCs are due in May of next year, so basically about a year. A lot of runs to do or conversations to have.
What's the frequency of the GMA 12 meet? What's the frequency that the GMA 12 members?
We've been meeting about every 2 months,
Okay.
but that can be increased if we start running into things getting gummed up.
We'll keep working on filling in the gap here and answering some of those questions. I know Chris is online taking notes about what y'all asked about.
I would say after you leave and you go, gee whiz, and you think of something, then at least shoot me an email and here's a suggestion, here's a thought. Okay.
Any other questions from the board on the presentation? All right. Item number 6, executive session. This time the board will go in executive session under Texas Government Code 551071 to receive attorney-client privileged information regarding pending transport permit applications for groundwater from the Simsboro Aquifer, for RH2O LLC, for Clifford A. Stiles, for James C. Bryan, for LWB4, for Vizino Investments, for Eli Family Partnership, for Cooler de Brazos, and all of whom are co-applicants for UW Brazos Valley Farm LLC, ongoing settlement discussions and related mediation of the State Office of Administrative Hearings as required by District Board Order Number 1. Pending contested permit applications for groundwater from the Simsboro Aquifer. Clifford A. Stiles for James C. Bryan.
Yes, sir.
Family Partnership for RH2O, for Vizino Investments, for Luis Moore, for Cooler de Brazos, and for UW Farm LLC. Pending writ of mandamus filed by Texas A&M University System and Brazos County District Court. Clause number 24-002626-CV-472 and related court filings. Pending lawsuit of Vizino Investments LP versus Brazos Valley Groundwater Conservation District, case number 6:25-CV-0001, filed in the United States District Court of the Western District of Texas, Waco Division. Enforcement of meter accuracy certification of permit holders, water production, export, and administrative fees, and groundwater conservation district related issues in the 89th Texas Legislature. That list keeps getting longer.
I was gonna say,
And that's all.
just went through. Let's keep-
Am I done here? Did y'all need a record of your executives?
Not executive, but they'll come back after executive.
Oh, they'll come.
It's 4:24. Board is coming out of executive session. Let the record show that Chris Zeig is no longer in attendance. Item number 7, discussion and possible action on items listed and deliberated in executive session as noticed above, and agenda item number 6. Do we have any motions?
I move that we make a change to the 2025 fee structure or fee schedule only related to multi-use permits So the new wording would be
For production fees.
for production fees. The new wording would be agricultural fee rate will be assessed for the permit unless and until a well is produced for other permitted purposes during the applicable year, in which case the applicable production fee for the non-agricultural use will be charged for the entire authorized production for the entire year.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion by the board? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Any other items of business? Moving on to item number 8, general manager's report.
All right, so, there's the first here, yeah. Oh, it sucks. It really does. Okay, that's okay. All right, you got your 4 maps that then I sent it out to you this morning. We're still right on the edge of drought, but boy, it's been better. We've gotten some rain of recent, so that's a good thing. You can see your Palmer drought index is both the meteorological and hydrologic. And our the U.S. seasonal drought outlook is we're still right on that edge of, well, we could be in a drought and it could be tending, more development right there. Let's hope that isn't the case. Moving on, I have to the permitted amounts and actual production by for this page has been fully updated as to all permits. We have recently, we're getting some permits that are being either completely decommissioned, plugged, wells are, so the permits are going away. We're going to see that as we go through this year. We're going to have, because of our fee structure, we're going to see numbers being cut from X acre feet. It's going to come down just so they don't have to pay as much fee. We're going to see some of those permits that are relinquished. Don't know how many, but I fully see that happening. You did have one general manager permitted well, Pinnacle Gas Treatment out by Camp Cooley out there in that area. Has been bought by Comstock, and they needed 96.78 acre feet for industrial use. And that permit was issued on January the 14th of this year. That's the only permit we've had so far this year. And you'll see in your package, you'll see the worksheet for that well, the footprint of the well, and the issued first page of that permit. Then moving on. The next thing is DFC planning update for January. The only real update there is that we will be having a GMA 12 meeting on February the 21st. I was told today by Lost Pines that their board has decided they will pay no more than 30%.
So take that.
So take that. That's just what they said. So I guess we'll have a discussion at our next meeting as to how we're going to go about it. That's kind of the way I felt. Wow, that's interesting. Anyway, that's where we are on that. Again, we're leading the evaluation, the explanatory report. We should get to a number, a good estimate on what the explanatory report is going to cost. And hopefully have a good thorough discussion about that at on the 21st. You can tune in, that is online. So you can tune into that. 89th legislative session, there's been about 40 bills to what I can see. Sabrina Brown, our legislative consultant, has been keeping us fully plugged in on this. It is, all of what is in your packet is also online. There's 40 that have in some way are impacting either groundwater directly or it's impacting the administration of the office, that kind of thing. There's been a few bills that have been refiled from last session. One of them, probably the one that is, it's not concerning. It just gives me a little heartburn is they want to start breaking these DFCs into 10-year periods. And they say just for planning purposes, just for planning purposes. And it, I'm gonna give you my opinion, that doesn't work that way. People start circling in on that 10-year DFC and
These are lost. These were filed last session.
they were filed
They were
last
also
session. That was a Glenn Rogers that had filed that one.
Okay.
And there's some good things in that particular bill. I mean, it was showing why did your DFC move? Why is your DFC different than it was the last time? I get that. That's public needs to know that kind of thing. Were you in compliance with your DFC? Well, you can see, we show everybody that. We clearly let people know we're in compliance. Here's why we're in compliance. Here's how we measure. So there was a lot of common sense things that was in the Rogers bill last session that got refiled. That was one that just it needs to be surgically taken out. And that's my opinion. Anyway, so I'll let y'all look through all of those bills. We still got plenty of time for bills to be filed. It's all like to what, March the 14th, is that right?
For non-local bills.
I think it's
I don't
something like
think
that. And then you have my general manager report and Megan. And oh, by the way, before we go any further, where is she? We have a new employee, Ermine Dickman. She is a former teacher, retired, has steeped in education. And she has been hired to be the helpmate for Megan and the helpmate for John Crabtree. And y'all were out in the field today, as a matter of fact, and making her carry her load. So we welcome her on Monday and look forward to great things. So feel good about everything in that regard.
Well,
And she lives out at Camp Creek, Gordon Neck Loop Road. That's almost the end of the earth. So the way I said this to somebody long ago, or mine didn't tell you this, but I got out there when I was first in the district and, here I am 2013, 14, and I'm just trying to learn things. I told somebody if I was ever going to hide a dead body, that's where you do it, right out there, because you're not going to find it. Nobody's finding it.
Ellen,
Buzzards aren't going to
I
find
wondered why you said almost.
it. Anyway, they're still continuing to do education. There'll be a break here in education in a little bit. They're about to finish up the fourth grades. There's just a little handful of fifth grades. STAR tests come, and then everybody kind of shuts down right ahead of STAR tests because they've got to just cram for it. And then you'll pick up like the seventh grades, several seventh grades in as soon as start, and that's in May. So anyway, got a lot going on there. And John has just finished up, just about to finish up, having gone through all of our monitoring wells. We're just into some public water supply wells that we need to get to. With Ermine's hire, we're going to be able to get to all the things that we need to get to in the way of monitoring. And as you all know, that has become priority number one, because that's the real data that tells us where we are and what we can and can't do and should do. So And then, I cleaned out and you got 1 month's worth of the management plan of where we are and where we're going. And we did meet all, I didn't say this earlier, we met all of our objectives in our management plan. And you can see that via the district annual report. So we're gonna get a big check, just like we have been. That's all I got. Anybody got any questions?
Any questions for Alan on the general manager's report? Item number 9, discussion and possible future agenda items. Anybody have anything for future agenda item? I do have one question. Next board meeting in March. The next board meeting in March, does it coincide with spring break or any other activities that's,
No.
no? Okay.
Give it luck. Have you looked?
It's the 10th through the
Just said no, I didn't look.
14th, the 10th.
So, and the second Thursday, yes, it is spring break for
It
Brian
is.
College
Okay.
Station.
Yes.
Is there anybody that has any conflicts or whatever, if you just let Alan know if we need to move the meeting, we can.
Yeah.
Anything else? Item number 10, we're adjourned.
Thank y'all.